Alright then, lads, ladies, and those of us who know better. My name is Jackson MTT Kenny, and welcome back to Bold and Bright. I skipped the last episode because I really needed the break. Mostly because it feels like anything done on a computer takes me 10 times longer than it would just on paper. So editing turns out to be a real brat that I do not have the time for. And what else was I spending my time on, you may ask? Projects. So many projects. I've had to spend enough time with my brain at this point to know that I don't like only having one project. It drives me absolutely mental. Well, the very few days that I actually made it into art school, I remember we had to sketch out a design for something, then color it in with really rather crappy watercolor dishes. So I got in, I sketched my thing, I colored it in, which, by the way, it's watercolor. It takes time to dry, so the coloring it in took longer than it should have because, at least in my studio, I have ways of drying things more quickly. Did not have that in a classroom. And then looking up and realizing that I still have, 4 hours left in this class, and there's nothing else for me to do. Yeah, that didn't work out for a whole number of reasons, but I think the whole projects not exactly being lined up, and some of them you can only work on in certain places, so I can't just swap depending on what my brain's feeling that day. It just doesn't work. I mentioned in the last animatic behind the scenes that in front of me I have trays of projects that are barely started, mostly started, nearly finished, etc. So that no matter what my brain's in the mood for, if I feel like sketching, if I feel like coloring, if I feel like line arting, there's still something for me to do. All of that is to say is that I kind of maybe skipped the ADHD classic I can't finish things bug. I mean, sure, there's stuff I haven't finished in the past, but I have a hard time letting go of projects, even after they stop bringing me joy and after really where a reasonable person would call it quits. I do have a perfectionist streak. Which, for the last time, does not mean having a neatness streak. I don't give two fuck about what order my pens are in their wee case. What I do care about is making sure the line that I make with those pens matches what's going on in the head, which is not easy. So, dipping into the tragic backstory here, shocker, on the podcast I'm talking about my tragic backstory again, but I had an absolutely miserable time at school. I think even more than the classic, I have no rights, everything's stressful, and it feels like we're all trying to kill each other 24/7 levels of stress. I mean that I barely got anything done. My weird hippy-dippy school cancelled exams, so I just didn't have anything to do, so I was just sitting in classrooms going completely insane, and something that really sums it up, the year, my entire year in school, all flunked science. Because A, the science teacher kept disappearing, so we kept getting substitutes who didn't really know what they were doing. And B, the rule was you were only allowed to go as fast as the slowest person in the room. Which is fine for some things, but it's not fine if your assignment for the day is a worksheet that's literally fill in the 5 blanks. And the 5 blanks could not be easier. It's done in a minute and a half. But the people skiving off at the back just don't want to do it, so we're going to waste the next 3 weeks on this worksheet. I wish I was joking. It was infuriating. So why am I bringing this up? It's because I think that gave me a wee bit of a complex about finishing things. Because even though nowadays I can recognize that none of that was my fault, it's not my fault that there was a whole catastrophic mess of things going on in my academic career, from me being misevaluated to ending up in all the wrong places, abusive teachers, tons of bullies, a terrible system. None of that is actually on me. But the feeling still persists that I need to prove myself. To prove that no, seriously, it wasn't my fault that I walked away from that terrible experience without a single decent qualification to my name. I've got 2 C- in equivalence, and take a wild guess how many things that qualifies me for. Take a wild guess. Oh boy, I officially feel like I'm rambling, but I feel like we kind of underestimate just how much our teen years impact the rest of our lives. Because that is where you learn the important lessons and you gain your empathy and you learn things. And if the feedback coming back to you is shut up, stop whining and get through it, you lose sort of your ability to say no, or I need to slow down, or please for the love of God let me finish this science module, it should not be taking us this long. And I guess speaking out to any fellow artists listening here, It's hard. It's also really, really hard to explain to normal people why it's hard, because the perception that no one actually really wants to be doing their job, I feel like there's a certain type of person, myself included in this, where we want to achieve something. We're not just waking up and going through the motions. The little gears in the head never stop turning. We have passion, we have drive, we want to do something. And if you're stuck in a situation where you can't achieve things, or you're stuck in a situation where you are achieving things but you can't take the pride in them, it loops into a vicious circle of, okay, well I did this one really, really mentally intensive thing, and where's the dopamine from this? It's nowhere. And really the point I'm trying to make is that was a very long-winded explanation for why I scrapped one of my Halloween projects this year. I was going to do a slideshow for a cover, and then I didn't. And I was really struggling with the sunk cost fallacy, because I had like 2 frames done and a couple more almost done and some rest of them sketched out, but I wasn't feeling it. It was slightly above my technical ability, I had so much else to do, and I lost the passion for it. I didn't want to do it. A great quote that I've heard from Scott Christian Sava is, you're allowed to stop watching a boring film, you're allowed to stop reading a boring book, you're allowed to just stop doing things you don't like, and that applies to artistic endeavors as well. Does this mean drop everything the second it starts getting difficult? No. There's a really annoying bit, like 5 seconds before you finish a project, before you get that big dopamine rush, where it's a slog. It's happened with like every animatic I've made, every big crochet project I've ever done. You wind up just sitting there and staring into space for a minute and going, I have put so many hours of work into this, and it feels like it will never be done. Spoiler alert, for the most part, it does get done. But you have to get through that absolute nightmare valley before you actually get there. I know, it's so hard. And while I was struggling through my feels about having to scrap that project, I realized I needed to take a step back from illustration, because I was so far zoomed in that I needed to take a step back. I finally got the motivation to crochet again after a 2-month burnout from that, which sucked, by the way. There was just so much less to do with my hands when I was talking to people. It was bad. But I got the motivation to start back up again. I de-stashed, I took the wool back out of things, I went to a yarn festival and got so much inspiration, and now I'm feeling good. I scrapped the project that was becoming an energy sink. I'm working on the ones that I'm actually passionate about. I'm 93% done on the Halloween animatic. And sure, it hasn't exactly been easy to get here, but I'm glad I put the work in and scrapped the project that wasn't working for me. So let this be the lesson to all of you. You can stop something if it doesn't work, especially if you're neurodivergent. We spend so much time trying to fit in and meet quotas that we forget to remind ourselves that, wait, no, hang on, this just doesn't work for me. A classic theme you'll probably notice in a lot of my art is very, very few straight lines. And that is because I can't use rulers. Technically, I can, but it was sucking the joy out of it every time I realized that I had to draw a wall, or I had to draw this, or I had to draw that. All of that would require me getting out the ruler and measuring to 5 centimeters or whatever, and it wasn't worth it. If the end product isn't going to be worth all the toil and it isn't going to give you that dopamine hit at the end, quit it. Feel free to take this advice for relationships as well. If it ain't working, if it isn't working, for the love of God, quit it. What's that, phrase of litanies? Feck it, we ball, and if it sucks, we bail? If it sucks, bail, please. You don't need to save every sinking ship. Oh, this has gone so far off the rails. Honestly, I was a wee bit anxious getting back into, podcasting after that break I had to do because I was trying to avoid burnout, but honestly it feels good to get the microphone back out again. And I think that brings me quite nicely to the outro. So I've got a Tumblr blog. I'm at Blue Bold and Bright. This podcast release every other Friday except for the one after this because I need to take a break to edit animatics. So after that there will be an episode for Ace Week, and then I think we're back to normal until February. Was that concise enough for you? Did that go through? Since that's everything, my name is Jackson MTT Kenny, and this has been Bold and Bright.